Okay, back to my theory of everything. Um, I don't even remember where I left off, but I mostly remember everything I've kind of already covered. And I know that what I keep saying when I left off was that I'm going to talk about Trump being a time traveler, and that's what's going through my head right now. So that's what we're going to begin to discuss. Trump is a time traveler. Okay, so this theory, um, I came up with, well, I already felt some way about Trump when he first became president. When he first started running for president, I was kind of completely baffled. It felt like Idiocracy, the movie Idiocracy, and it felt like a joke. I literally thought that when he first started running for president that it was a joke, and that he was going to come out afterwards and be like, right, he wasn't actually running for president, right? I did not take it seriously at all. And then when he kept running, and then when he became the president, I was just dumbfounded. That just wasn't really in my at that point I started coming up with these theories because I was like, there's no way that this is what reality am I living in, was like kind of how it started, because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, there is no way that this is the real reality. Like, the fuck, when did I already kind of felt, because of like 2012 and stuff like that, that we were kind of moving into the Matrix. But at that point, it was pretty valid to me that we were fully engaged in this Matrix illusion reality, virtual reality. And I just couldn't even believe it. So then I started to like think about Trump, and I was like, how the fuck does somebody like this become the president? Well, when I was growing up, I'm 35. I'm about to be 35. When I was growing up, sorry, I don't mean to be obsessive about my parents right now. I knew Trump as a businessman. I knew him to be involved in a lot of real estate, but I knew him as a like socialite. Like, the real estate was kind of how he got his money, but his character was like that of being a socialite, of like getting all of this. He was just a playboy, literally like the American playboy. That's what I knew him as. I knew him as a skeezy piece of shit person that was known for always having some hot blonde on his arm, and just because he had money, and he just was a nasty person. Obviously very good in business. Not even very good, but very well known in business. It had a lot of different business ventures in order to kind of gain that notoriety. And then he was on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air once. And he was in Home Alone. And I think he was also in, what is that movie? The one where Arnold Schwarzenegger is like a superhero for his son. I think he was in that too. So I remember seeing him, and like he was on Nickelodeon once, I think, and like he was just like he would randomly show up in different media, even as a child. And I remember, like, as a child, the way that I was receiving that was that he was just this playboy. Like, he wasn't anything major to me by any means, and it was kind of always like the characters that he would even play in those shows was like that he was just this asshole known for being, promiscuous and hedonistic and living in the lap of luxury sort of deal, right? He's like American royalty that way, in the same way that the Kardashians are. They're not morally upstanding people. They're known for these luxurious what's the word, like, not gluttonous, but essentially like gluttonous lifestyles, right? And so then I started thinking about that, where I was like, oh, well, obviously he was using his money even back then to just get himself anywhere he could and to kind of place himself anywhere he could in order to gain some notoriety. Just that everybody kind of knew who he was and everybody kind of had this, concept of him. And that was all just coming through him playing certain roles in our society, especially through media. And I've since now seen like that he was like on Oprah back in the 80s and shit like that. So like he's always kind of been doing this, making himself well known. He wrote a couple books and stuff like that. Like, he's just involved himself in all of these different ways in order to stay in the public eye, relevant, in order to be relevant, right? Socially, in America. And then when I think I was a teenager, maybe in my early 20s, when he had his TV show. So at that point, like, I had already been aware of his character. And that TV show was kind of like a play on that character. That he's an arrogant fucking asshole, piece of shit person that just believes himself to be the best at business regardless. And he has no problem throwing people under the bus, destroying people's lives, like doing anything he can for money, all about the money and all about making a name for himself. So that was like, I didn't actually watch the show. I think I might have seen a couple episodes. I remember my dad finding it entertaining. He liked his character. He liked Trump's character that way. And I think a lot of people around their age group kind of liked that, where he would, that he had this like, oh, you're fired because you're not meeting my standard. Where it's like, if anybody were actually working for somebody like that outside of a TV show and getting some sort of claim to fame because they were on this TV show, everybody would fucking hate that dude. But because he's Trump, he just got this, like, it's always been able to manipulate the masses with his narcissism, and everybody just fucking eats it up for some reason because everybody's fucking brainwashed because they've already... Okay, so that's when I started realizing, where I was like, there's no way that this isn't some sort of deeply embedded conspiracy, because this is fucking insane. I was like, why do people even like this dude? The fact that people are so out of tune with themselves that they literally are finding themselves like attracted, energetically to this man at all, and that he's able to be popular being this type of person, there's something terribly, terribly wrong here. And I was trying to assess that and figure out what that was, right? So, and especially because then my family voted for him and was supporting him. And I thought that I had been kind of estranged from them already, around that time. And I remember seeing them like prior to the elections and making some joke about Trump. And my mom got irate, as she does, and started, fighting with me about it. And I was like, just so mind blown. Like, wait, you actually support this idiot? This fucking dirty, perverted piece of fuck? Like, you actually support him enough that you're going to sit here and fight your own daughter about it? Like, wow. And then my brother also like started, because the Alex Jones was supporting him, Joe Rogan was supporting him at the time and stuff, and my family doesn't know how to think for themselves. So my brother started talking about how he supported him too, and I was just, that was too much for me. My brother had been my best friend growing up. Like, he was the only person that I thought understood me. He's the one that taught me all of these things about the occult. We were constantly researching conspiracy theories and stuff like that before that became this huge thing, back when I was a kid, when I was very, very little. So I assumed he'd be right on board with my concepts, and the fact that he was supporting Trump was just like, what the fuck is happening right now? What is going on? So, I just was feeling some way. Okay, just feeling some way about him. In the back of my head, it was like, well, in the forefront of my mind, anytime I heard him, I was like, no, there's something going on there. I from day one, even back when I saw him on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like, there was something about him that I was like, there's a conspiracy here. That guy's involved in some big conspiracy. I could just tell, You can tell. I don't know how you can't tell, to be honest. I don't understand why all these people, I know a lot of intelligent people that, like, especially now, are like, actually, I probably would vote for him. Now that he's a fucking proven to be a felon, he's already been proven to be a rapist. He's already been proven to be, just like a terrible business person that's skeezy, that steals, that, like, doesn't have any actual claim to the things that he swears outside of just that he acts some type of way, and people buy into that. Like, it blows my mind. And then I happened to hear one day, I don't even know how I came across this information, but I happened to hear that I must have been, and it might have been on like History Channel or something like that. I was watching something about Nikola Tesla, and it happened to mention that the government attorney, like the federal attorney, that was put on the case for Nikola Tesla in order to assess his, what is that called? Estate upon his death. That the federal attorney that was sent in to assess all of Nikola Tesla's estate and to officially report what Tesla had and didn't have, and maybe, it was some sort of conspiracy thing that I was watching to begin with, right? Because it's talking about how Nikola Tesla, like, there was so many things pointing to the potentiality of him having a time machine or having developed some sort of something regarding a time machine. But this official, lawyer, attorney had gone in there to assess all of his things and had determined that there was no time machine, right? And that was supposed to be like the conspiracy. Well, that man, the man who literally, this part is true. My theory comes after this. Because this is when it popped into my head, and then all of a sudden I was like, this whole theory just came into life. And I can't even, I'll get into it. Anyways, so what I did here, and so what it was coming not just from me, it's not just my theory, like this is supposed fact, is that the federal attorney that officially claimed Nikola Tesla's estate, in the official record, Nikola Tesla had not been developing a time machine. There was no work of his, no paperwork, no any sort of, equations, nothing that would point to him having even been trying to develop a time machine. Everything that they had claimed, and like a lot of it had been classified. It wasn't declassified for a very long time. But it was all like free energy stuff, right? And that's why it had to be classified. And, the conspiracy was that because of him trying to develop free energy, that he had been potentially unalived by the government, as they do, in order to gain, because if he would have been able to develop it, and in the way that he was trying to make it accessible to the people, then the government would be out of a significant amount of power, energy, money, resources, just because people would be able to provide those things for themselves. That's why Nikola Tesla was doing those things, because he was trying to make it so that the people didn't have to rely on the government. But of course, we'd already at this point, back in this is like the 40s, 50s, something like that. It's not that long ago. It was not that long ago, 40s, 30s, something like that. Had already been well taken over by the elite and by, the Zionists that are, set on world domination through these means. So he went in there and, he marked everything that Tesla had, and the official report claimed that there was no time machine. No time machine. That was just a conspiracy. And at that point, then I started conspirizing myself. I started theorizing about the conspiracy. And I can't tell you fully where this concept came from. I was talking with my roommate about it. I talk to everybody about it when I get the chance, to be honest, and people are like, okay, that's all too much information. Like, too much. It bothers people. I don't know what to tell you. But when we were talking about it, like, he was like, well, that doesn't make sense because of this. And then and like the way he was talking, like, by the end of it, like, he was like, well, maybe that is the case, and so that was based off of his information that he has, and he's real smart with history. He knows a lot that I don't. So that's what was funny about it too, because I was like, by all means, like, break it down if you can, like, prove where it's not potentially true, and I won't hold to it any longer, if you can prove that it's not true. But like, if there is a space for it, and there is like all these different types of things, like, it's not that you have to believe these things and let them run your life, and you don't gotta, turn into some sort of crazy paranoid person about all this stuff. But like, it's also not safe to just act like none of this is actually happening, if there is these potentials, because we already know that, like, anybody that's trying to be in power and stuff like that, like, there's probably some agenda behind it, right? And if they're, potentially, like, related to all of the other presidents we've ever had, or, part of certain secret societies and stuff like that, like, how much of it can you trust when it, sort of deal. So my theory was that, so it first started off, my theory was that there was documentation of Tesla trying to build a time machine, but that he had yet to produce an actual working time machine yet. And I don't know how developed it was at that point, but so much of the stuff that he was doing was not part of, like, common science, right? So my theory was that this guy, the one thing I left out, this is not part of the theory, this is factual, that guy was Trump's, I believe, his mother's brother or uncle, something like that. His mother's uncle, maybe? Or his mother's brother, his uncle. I think it was his mother's uncle, but was related to the Trump family. That man, that lawyer that seized all of Nikola Tesla's assets after he had passed away, just so happened to be related to the Trumps. Okay? I feel like that's all I should have to say. Like, at this point, like, it all just makes sense. That's how it was for me. Like, that's a lot of information. Like, that is what a coinky-dink. How, how coincidental. Like, the world is a stage, and in the movies there are no coincidences. This is all quite intentional. Anyways, so my theory is that this man found those things, hid them, marked that wasn't the case, that those things didn't exist, and then sold all of what was being developed in the way of a time machine to Nazi scientists in Russia. Now, the Nazi scientists after the Third Reich, when they had been disbanded, right? We did away with all the Nazis, but no, we didn't. There were plenty of Nazis and people with those ideologies still left, and especially the scientists. Like, they weren't the, what is that called? Like, the leaders of the soldiers and stuff like that. Like, they weren't, on the militant end, they were the ones, they were worse. They were the ones that were, like, promoting and doing all of these research, experiments and stuff like that in the way of eugenics. And, the scientists were the ones that had like taken excursions over to Tibet, and what is that? It is Tibet, isn't it? I'm thinking of a word that begins with an M, a country that begins with an M, and I can't think of it. Been in the mountains. It's not Mongolia, though. I think it's Tibet. They'd gone a lot of different places, but like, I mean, because they were trying to find all of the lost information that, you know, at one point in time, like we used to have all of this information of ancient technologies and the advancements that allowed for societies to become developed the ways that they did, but then those things got broken apart and sent all over the world, you know, like the Ark of the Covenant, like those types of things. Those were the things that they were looking for. It was all these different artifacts and all these different bits of knowledge and information that are very important in the occult for the purposes of social engineering. And I believe it was Tibet where they found the swastika symbol originally and then inverted it and used it themselves. But that's when they were also like finding like the importance of symbology and using those things certain ways. That's where they were gaining that knowledge, right? And that's where they learned about the Aryan race, as far as it being a like ancient alien race, essentially, and where so much of our modern society or like civilization, fundamental aspects of civilization came from, as far as they were concerned, as for as much as they learned. So that's what they were doing, and that's how they were, you know, used within the Reichs. And after the Third Reich, they disbanded and kind of just went their own ways. They went all over the world. Some of them went to America, some of them went to China, some of them went to Australia, some of them went to Antarctica, some of them went to Russia, and I'm sure everywhere else. I'm sure everywhere else, to be honest. It wasn't just like there was 5 guys. Like, this was a whole system that had been established, you know, for the point of doing these types of research. And like I said, it was really more revolving around an ideology. So like anybody could be prone to it as long as they were into that ideology, and then kind of engaging with the steps towards that form of gnosis, more or less. I don't know why Russian scientists were what came into my head. Like, I don't know exactly where this information came from, but the information that I came up with, that I received when it came to this, was that man, Trump's uncle or great uncle, took what is it called? The blueprints and whatever working parts they had for the time machine, and sold it to Russian Nazi scientists who began developing it. Now, this was, again, back in like the 40s, 50s or so, maybe 60s. I think it was early 60s even, maybe. I wish I knew offhand, because it really wasn't that long ago. And they started developing it. They started reverse engineering and then working their way to develop it, to develop time travel. And that is largely in part where the Trump family came into like this whole bunch of money, okay? This is also going to get into my time-space theories, but that's what so then the Trump family starts acquiring all of this money, and they start being able to kind of like get themselves into these different parts of society, influential, affluent parts of society, to gain any sort of influence. And this goes on. Now, everything's happening the way that it's happening, but this is the original timeline. This is the timeline that we used to exist in prior to the space-time continuum being split, when they actually do finish building the time machine and making it work. The only way that it works is within a split space. It is within a different dimension, just directly on top of this one. There's no way around it because of the singularity. Which is like a big part of like why we keep searching for all these things too. But we're in a loop. We're in this weird vacuum and loop where like we're trying to do all of these things because there's so many different aspects that are all sorts of fucked up now. But in my theory, they continue to develop this as that whole family and bloodline is gaining influence, both. The scientists are developing this technology. Also, there's a whole bunch of like social engineering going on through the media, by way of both teams, that is helping move in the direction of making the official plans possible. And the official plans are really just to revive the Nazi regime. So, and I don't know where these numbers come from. I don't know why this is in my head. But the theory that came to me was that in 2066, between 2063 and 2066, they officially do create time travel. And at that point, like, the world is in such disarray and so close to, like, everything. We've already had some forms of well, we're in a world war, and not just the secret, quiet one that we're in right now, but, like, nuclear tensions and stuff. Like, we've already been dealing with those kinds of things. Yeah, I would say that nuclear wars probably already happened. It actually probably happens, like 20 years prior, or so, 15, maybe 10 years prior. But the scientists have gone underground at this point. All of the affluent people have gone underground and continue to develop this technology. And that's more what it comes down to, because they're trying to go back and stop this from happening, this reality from happening, right? So at the same time, too, there's also people that are trying to work against these people in order to keep this from happening, because they're trying to make something else happen. All of it is leading up to nuclear war and destruction and pretty much the end of civilization. And that's what we're all trying to avoid, more or less. But at the right people's expense, and so that the right people gain power, right? Right. It's just whoever wins this race. So they develop it, and they send, and now because, the Trump family is the one that, like, has been tied to all of this the whole time, and that is, responsible for all of this, at this point, at least for the last, now, 60 years or so? More than that, for the last for the last 100 years. The Trumps have secretly been kind of in control of everything. There's been a whole lot of other stuff going on, but in this reality, they're the ones that have been, it's their money and stuff like that through all of this, working through the Brotherhood, like the Masons and stuff like that, to build up on this Nazi regime. Well, they send a Trump, which is like one of Trump's ancestors from right now. I mean, not ancestors, one of his predecessors, one of his great-great-grandchildren, something like that. One of his bloodline. They send him back in time. Now, what's weird about it is because these are the numbers that I came up with, but because we live in a time loop, and because there's multiple timelines happening on top of themselves because of the break in the time-space continuum, I'm kind of talking about, like, the original timeline, but it kind of fucks a lot of shit up to the point where like there's these multiple timelines that are happening, and they're happening quicker and faster and faster, and then like falling in on each other, kind of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What a mind fuck that is. That's kind of what's happening, and since the time-space continuum was split. And so Trump's son right now, his youngest son, is essentially the one that gets sent back in time. And he's just a reincarnation of himself at this point. He's his own clone at this point. But that's because of the way that everything's breaking down and moving so fast that it's actually been pushed up to the point where like it's all happening right now. In this timeline. But in, 30 years from now or whatever, 40 years from now, it's him, but it's not, but it is, gets sent back in time to the early 1900s in order to start instilling their family line into a position of power in order to allow the uncle to become the attorney that gets access to these assets, right? And this is how they did it this is how they did that, and that's what creates this time loop, and that's why it's so fucked up, because we're just like in this Matrix time loop. There's an actual reality happening that we are just only experiencing and only a part of energetically and in the astral realms. It looks much like things looked at one point in time prior to all of this, but there was also there's been these paradigm shifts that have been happening since the split of the space-time continuum, and that's generally like when one of the paradigms breaks down, moves on top of another one, they converge, and that's what's like, and we are getting to a singularity that way as well. In quantum physics, we've already discovered the Higgs boson, and since then we have, and with the help of AI and our advancements with the AI, we have measured the singularity, but we're still moving into the actual singularity, which is when all of these timelines finally converge and break down, and it's the end and the beginning again. Or for the first time, really. We're just living, I said it in a different video, but the way that time works, space-time works, is that we, because of experience, because of what experience is, because of the state of experience, we experience time and space in a linear fashion, but it's actually just a singular moment in space-time that happened. It's like a blink of an eye, and that's it, and that's everything. It's just we're experiencing it, so it seems to be laid out, so it seems like all of these different processes and evolutions and stuff leading up to a certain thing. But then the split in the space-time continuum kind of created this sphere of time in which everything's kind of folding in on top of itself and unfolding in that sense and breaking down until it reaches that singularity again, which is just the beginning of time. We're literally like moving backwards in time, but forwards in history. Forwards in space, kind of, right? But backwards in time. I wish that I was better. Like, I should start getting back into quantum theory so that I can, like, have the right terms and stuff, because I used to be a lot better at communicating these things. It's been, like, 15 years. It's been 15 years since I first started getting into that stuff and first started being able to communicate those things. And it's been at least 10 years, really, since I actively was involved in those things. So I'm just a little rusty. But there is a book. Okay, so the Trumps get sent back in time, right, in order to place themselves. There's a book. Now, that was the concept that I had. And the concept that I had initially was that it was Donald Trump himself that was, well, and it was, but like string theory, but that it was him himself that like in the future, like it's when he's older and then he gets sent back in time and he like clones himself and is able to, you know, put himself as the person. But it's really just a build up on that. There's a, because then I came across, and I don't even know how, I think the thing was that once I started coming up with these concepts, I started researching it. And then I realized that I wasn't the only one that was under the impression that there was some sort of weird conspiracy going on with the time-space continuum, with Nikola Tesla, the potential time machine, his uncle being the one that was officially like, nope, there is no time machine, that was like taking all of his assets and everything, the conspiracy behind Nikola Tesla and how it works with Trump, like that all converged into this thing where like there were other people on the internet. When I came up with this stuff in my own head and then started looking into it, there were already other people that were also thinking the same things and coming up with the same things, right? So then I happened upon this thing where it was talking about, because that's, I mean, that's always how it works for me, right? Like, there's nothing new under the sun. But somebody had posted about this book that was from like 1903, 1906, something like that, called The Marvelous Adventures of Baron Trump, The Marvelous Underground Adventures of Baron Trump, something like that. And, you know, it's a pretty basic tale. It's kind of like Journey to the Center of the Earth. And kind of like a mixture between that and the mixture of that and Alice in Wonderland. But the main character is this Baron Trump. And that was like, and then there were, you know, people talking about the conspiracy of like him being, of Baron being a time traveler. But that already was fitting into all of these other concepts that I had. So then I was just like, okay, like now, and a lot of the conspiracy on, or the theory on my end came from having studied quantum mechanics. So like I already had these like really weird space-time theories, you know, and then like I'd seen Interstellar. I don't even know when that came out, but I'd seen Interstellar, and like that is such a good movie. I always bring it up, but like it's so profound. I love it so much. But like that explains like space-time and the way that these things work in that way too, to a degree. I mean, we live in such a wild, wild world. I'm not going to try to ruin Interstellar. You really, really should watch it. But there's a lot of parts that blew my mind, to be honest. And mostly just because I didn't have a full understanding of physics outside of what I learned myself and from an astrophysicist I dated for like 4 months. So I had like a really random basic understanding of a lot of things outside of, you know, my own studies. But in the movie, you know, they go to outer space and they go to this planet and, you know, to retrieve a broken satellite. And on this planet, you know, because of its rotation and the force of gravity on it, like what would be a day to us is like, let's say, you know, 30 days there, or vice versa. Like a day there is like 30 days here is what it is. Something like that. That's not the actual ratio and rate. It's just something like that. That moments there are, you know, days here, essentially. And I've heard that. We've all heard that when it comes to other planets. You know, like Venus has a different thing, Mars has a different thing. But I did not understand the actual, like, tangible reality of that and what that would look like. And in the movie, like, they do such a great job of it. But, like, essentially, like, that's what it is. Because, like, you know, what should just be, like, a little half-hour job and task of getting onto this planet, retrieving the satellite, and leaving, you know, and it's supposed to take a very short time, would essentially end up actually being a 5-year venture for us here on Earth. Like we're waiting for these astronauts, okay, and they leave. And it takes them that long before they come back. But that's just because of the time in space and because of the way that time works on every planet. So that was really mind-blowing. And I'm trying to be as vague as possible because I really just want you to watch the movie for yourself. But then you'd understand what I'm talking about when it comes to space-time and how all of these things are really just relative to our personal experience of them. It's so wild. We live in such a wild, wild world. But yeah, so essentially like that then leads into, like I said, like, in the first and second video that I made in this series, like, talking about conservative Christianity and Zionism and Freemasonry and all these other secret societies that essentially all converge in theology when it comes to this manifest destiny. And, Trump being the Antichrist, but not the Antichrist in the way that I'm the Antichrist in the actual way, like the actual opposition to Christ's consciousness, to Christhood, for the individual, the actual like overlord, of human consciousness, the enemy, the ultimate enemy against freedom and against individualism and against self-actualization, and even just self-awareness. And he's already proven himself to be that. So like, even if he isn't the major one, even if it comes later on, like, I mean, Hitler was one of those too, and Nero was one of those, and they've existed forever, all these Antichrist spirits. But like, he's definitely one of those. I don't know how people don't see this, but like, he is not for anyone but himself. He is not, but that's what it is. People are so deluded that, and disillusioned that they believe that level of narcissism is reflective of true personal freedom, when it's actually the opposite of it. If that man didn't have money and affluence, if that man didn't have social influence and, like the arrogance that, gains him that favor, if he didn't have all of these, popular, rich friends and all of this, influence in media, he wouldn't be shit. There's nothing great about him outside of the fact that he's placed himself over time with his money in order to have this influence. So like, that's the illusion in of itself. He's a perfect puppet for it because he's shown how effective that illusion can be to gain that influence over the masses. And the masses are like cultishly following him, to the weirdest degree I've ever seen. The Republicans have kind of over time become that to begin with, because I kind of saw that with Bush too, and I saw it a bit with Obama, but that's kind of also when the Democrats started kind of checking out and they were just like blue no matter who, and it's just like, oh my god, none of these people are thinking for themselves. But the illusion of self-awareness still existed on the right, up until Trump. And now it's just like, now it's on steroids, and that's why people are buying into it. But it is an illusion, and it shouldn't be that. If you were actually self-aware at all, like, you would see that person as somebody that is unreasonably arrogant. There isn't like unreasonable. You can't reason with the man. And there is no justification beyond the power that he has attained through like money and media influence. So those things aren't real either. It's all just part of this big illusion. It's all just part of this game, right? And it's all at our expense, in the natural world. You can't tell me it's not part of the illusion. It is quite obvious that that's exactly what it is. We are living in idiocracy. I mean, it ain't even a joke anymore. It's sad. And, so that's part of it. And it's the same reason why, like, why would somebody like that, This man boasts about how he's best friends with Putin, who I guarantee doesn't give a shit about this dude outside of what he can do for him. But he just loves sucking Putin's dick, and also largely supports Israel. Like, we got to, as Americans, support Israel, but we're also like closely affiliated with Russia and North Korea. Like, get the fuck out of here. Of course that's what it is. It's just like I said in the last video too, where it's like not surprising at all when Christian conservatives are so closely related to Freemasons, are so closely related to Satanists, are so closely related to, you know, like all of the bullshit. It's all the same shit. Not that everybody involved in those things is part of that. Again, that's, you know, only because people choose to identify by these things. It's not the people that are the problem, it's the systems in of themselves. But there is specific bloodlines that are running these things. And they are specific people. Are they human? Well, what even is a human? I mean, there's like 5 different types of humans to begin with. So I don't really care about that stuff too much. I'm not getting into like the reptilian, you know, the conspiracy that way, because I see that almost as like a distraction, more or less, because I think everything is just so mixed. But I definitely do think that Trump's family is a bunch of time travelers that put themselves into a position of power just so that they could gain access to this power, just so that they could gain world dominion, and that they're just part of this entire system that everybody swears that they hate so much and that they're all against, and they think they're going to support this dude just because he says those things. But like, nothing he says is fact. Everything he says is inaccurate, and he doesn't back up any of the things that he says. So like, he might call out these things and point out the truth. That doesn't mean that he's a great guy or that he's not even involved. It's like aiding and abetting at best. People just don't have the capacity nowadays, it seems, to be able to consider one side or the other without identifying by either. And that's a problem, because that's like the basis of personal intelligence. And it's just, it seems to be quite lacking, specifically in this culture. I don't know. That's not to say that everything I've just said is true, like I said, or even feasible. I'm reasonable. I can't say that all of those things totally are either. I mean, that's what I've come to through what I've learned. So it all backs itself up that way. But there, you know, you throw a wrench in a system and it could throw the whole thing off. That's why my focus is always on sustainability, and why I try not to give these things too much power. I do think it's important to educate yourself and to kind of know what's going on, to not just believe everything that you're taught and told by anybody, myself included, and to question things and just to know yourself. But I don't think that like it's I think the most important thing is to truly know yourself and to be happy and to stay in high vibrations. So like my family, you know, started going off the deep end, and then all of a sudden, like, first my brothers got into Alex Jones, and then my parents got into Alex Jones, and at that point it was just like they're just fear mongering. That's their thing, and that's what they love. They worship death. They are in a death cult and they love it. And I just don't think that that is beneficial to the sustainability of anything. Like, I think as a human, you would want to sustain human life. But at the same time, like, not at the expense of everything else. That's not sustainable. If what it takes to sustain human life is to destroy the planet, that isn't what it takes to sustain human life, because, well, it is if you're fucking Elon Musk and just want to move off to another planet, destroy that. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, if you're the toxic one and you keep fucking up your relationships, getting into another relationship isn't going to make it better. You have to actually do the internal work to stop being toxic. Otherwise, you're just going to keep fucking everything up. And we're not there yet. We're not a self-aware populace. We're not a self-responsible and accountable populace, and that is the problem. That's why we're falling for people like Trump. That's why we've fallen for the last fucking 50 presidents, or 52 presidents, however many we've had, 42, however the fuck many we've had. 46, something like that. I don't know. You know the number probably. I don't care that they've all been shit. It's all a game. It's all a game. And I'm tired of playing it. That's why I like to, I'm like at the point where like the game works by people, not by, it's like the, like the game. Once you know the rules, like then you fall for it. But you're not supposed to tell people because then like it ruins the game, right? I'm fine with ruining the game. I'm fine. Let's play a new game. Maybe a game that actually like is sustainable for people and isn't just based off of like a few people gaining control over the entire world at everybody else's expenses. Especially when those people are worshiping future and ancient AI. They don't care if we as human beings continue on. They don't find our existence essential. They're transhumanists. They believe that computers are the epitome and that we could completely do away with people, and that will be in the future. And you'll hear people talk about it, that in the future, that will be what humans have to pass on. And that's our legacy. And I think that's fucking bullshit. I think that we would have the capacity to be flying around and floating through walls and all of this type of shit if we would stop putting our energy into the external and start actually doing the internal work. Like, we are superheroes. We just don't put our energy into that. We create this prison that we continue to exist within and validate, and then we like get to celebrate every 4 years that we find a new prison guard. Like, dumb and senseless and not in our best interest. But this is all just my opinion. These are all just my theories. And I am more than open to receiving feedback, positive or negative. Okay, I gotta pee. So thanks for listening. Have a good one. See ya with the next crazy thing I have to talk about.